Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Holy Week reflection from West Kilbride Parish Church. Each evening this week we have a different person who is leading our reflection, and on this Tuesday of Holy Week our reflection is going to be led by Paul Selman.
The reading for today is taken from Mark's Gospel, chapter 14, and starting at verse 43. It follows on from the section where Jesus has gone to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray with his disciples. Just as Jesus was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer, Judas, had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Am I leading a rebellion," said Jesus, "that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man, wearing nothing but a linen garment, was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and a whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another not made with hands.' Yet even their testimony did not agree." Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any more witnesses?" he asked. "You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. "You also were there with that Nazarene Jesus," she said. But he denied it. "I don't know or understand what you are talking about," he said, and went out into the entryway. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, "This fellow is one of them." Again he denied it. After a little while, those standing near said to Peter, "Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." He began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know this man you're talking about." Immediately the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. May God bless to us this reading from his holy word. Thank you for inviting me to do this Easter week reflection. The passage that we've just heard from Mark is a gripping story. It has everything: cowardice and bravery, betrayal and treachery, political expediency and conspiracy, violence and pacifism, mounting tension and a showdown between good and evil. It's a story of cosmic dimensions that will change history. And it has some great characters. Jesus himself, Peter, the high priest, even Judas Iscariot as the archetypal villain. No wonder Hollywood branded it the greatest story ever told. And yet it's also a narrative of minor characters. There's a posse of unnamed armed enforcers hired by the temple authorities. There's a young man who slips out of his clothing and runs away in terror. Some commentators think this may have been Mark himself, which does indeed seem a possibility. There are unnamed elders and priests, unnamed false witnesses, bystanders at the fire pit. Crucially, there's a servant girl who asks Peter about his identity. I wonder if she was ever aware that she was fulfilling a prophecy and would go down in history. Peter, I'm sure, was genuine when he said he'd never deny Jesus, but he didn't expect his undoing to come in the form of an offhand brush-off to a pesky servant girl. It's often in such off-guard moments that we do unwittingly let Jesus down. But this incident was pivotal in forcing Peter to confront the major fault line in his personality before he could go on to be restored by Jesus as a tender and feeder of his sheep and become the rock on which the church could be built. So here we have a truly epic story with its ensemble of major and minor players. Or rather, we have an episode of great importance, because it doesn't actually become a great story until somebody tells it. For this incident to be handed down through the centuries, it needed story keepers and storytellers, some major and some minor. We are phenomenally lucky that we have Mark's narrative. It's a pacey, compact account full of vitality. He was one of the major storytellers. But he wasn't, in fact, that great an apostle. If he is indeed the young man slipping loose of his garment and legging it at Gethsemane, it's hardly a heroic start. We first hear of Mark by name in Acts of the Apostles, where he's on a missionary journey with Paul and Barnabas. But here again, he legs it when they're under pressure at Pamphylia, so much so that Paul refuses to take him on a second missionary journey and has a blazing row with Barnabas about the issue. Mark and Barnabas then head off on their own, but we don't hear whether or not they had any success. Mark may have been a second-rate apostle, but he was a major league storyteller, and surely this is what God chose him for. As narrators, we may only be minor league, but even so, God has given us all the responsibility to be story keepers and storytellers. And here's the nub of my reflection for Holy Week. This may be the greatest story ever told, but as a story, it needs people to tell it and retell it to each generation, or it could become the greatest story never told. We live in an increasingly secular culture where many people have never heard of the arrest in Gethsemane, the show trial, or Peter's threefold denial. How are they to know unless we tell them? We may not be major players like Mark. Most of us, myself included, are more like the anonymous minor characters in this passage. So how can we, minor players with limited talent, be the story keepers and storytellers of our time? Well, here are 4 suggestions for us to reflect on. First, we need to make sure we know the Jesus story. Sometimes in discipleship courses, participants are recommended to read Mark's Gospel in a walla, a single sitting. It's not a difficult read, it's a vivid account in which everything happens immediately. This Holy Week, there is a plan for members of West Kilbride Parish Church to read aloud the whole of Mark's Gospel. Indeed, it may already be happening by the time you see this video. If we do manage to achieve this, then what an opportunity to refresh our memories about the Jesus story. Second, we need to tell the story. We may not be great preachers, and we don't want to ram the gospel down people's throats, but we have opportunities to tell our children and grandchildren, and to respond to opportunities that arise in random conversations. For example, has anyone ever asked you why we speak of a person walking on water or hiding their lamp under a bushel? I bet some of you could give some great answers to these questions. Third, there are many ways in which we can communicate the story visibly. If you ever take a creative writing course, one of the first things your tutor will teach you is show, don't tell. One illuminating incident can be worth more than many paragraphs of descriptive text. We can bear witness visually to the story. For instance, by walking, when we're allowed, up Law Hill at Easter. By keeping the church open and peopled as much as possible during the pandemic. And by putting up banners, crafts, pamphlets and the like outside the church. And here may I say a big thank you to everyone who's been involved in putting up displays at the front of the church. They have been a great source of encouragement and hope to passers-by, including many non-church goers. Sadly, many churches had to put up a sign saying, "Closed due to COVID-19, see you when it's over." Thank God, West Kilbride Parish Church was able to do so much more. And fourthly, and I believe this is something that as a church we must really pray about and reflect on, we need to build upon the lessons we have learned during lockdown. We have become dab hands at apps and computer software that we'd never heard of a year ago. We've harnessed the power of the internet in ways we'd never imagined to create new opportunities to share and spread the gospel across a new mission field. We mustn't let these newly acquired skills, experiences and knowledge just slip away. They may prove crucial to the revival of church in our times. This week, we're looking at the greatest story ever told. We are part of a global community of story keepers and storytellers. But in this part of the world, we live in a society and culture where the Easter story is marginalised. It needs to be told and retold in order to remain vivid and relevant. Unless we witness in word and deed, people may forget the drama of Holy Week and the significance of Calvary. May God give us all the wisdom, confidence and opportunity to tell, show and share the Jesus story.